to According to John Unbridled. Today I have a guest with me, a special guest. He comes to my church and he is involved. He is with the youth. He fills in pulpit for me, does a multitude of things, but his whole background is medical, and that is what we're going to talk about today. So, Keith Algozzine, how are you doing, brother?
I am good, man. It's so good to be here. I have seen this set up a bunch of times, and I have been jealous of how awesome it is, and I'm ready to roll. I'm ready to be a guest.
Yeah, you haven't been on here yet.
No, I've just seen it. I bring my kids up here to see it, my wife, and but
and now you're
welcome
on.
to the show.
That's right. Welcome to the show. All right, so guys, what we're going to talk about today is the mental health crisis that we're having. And Keith, you and I, we did it on a Sunday night. We did the teaching at the church. You did the medical side.
Yep.
I did the spiritual side of it. And I thought, man, you did such an amazing job with the medical side, with the PowerPoints that you show, the facts, the graphs, everything. And guys, if you're watching it, you'll obviously get to see it because we're going to put all the graphs up, and you'll be able to see the true numbers of what's going on. And so today we're going to be talking about anxiety. And, how can you stop being anxious? And what does the medical field tell us about anxiety versus what Scripture tells us about anxiety? And so that's what we want to cover. But I'm going to go ahead and let you share a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to jump into this.
Sure. I'd be remiss not to just describe myself, what I'm really passionate about, which, as you know, I'm a child of God. I'm a servant of Jesus Christ. I'm a husband to my wife, father to my kids, friend to my friends. And then, with this stuff, I did sports medicine as an undergraduate, so I was big time into that. And then as I moved on, I got my medical degree as a physician assistant, and I've been in emergency medicine. I've been in primary care. I've been in mental health. But it's actually interesting. The thing that probably gets me most jazzed is something called evidence-based medicine. And that's why I've become such a skeptic, and my skepticism over the years has only increased, because when I was going through school, right, you go and you get taught,
right,
and you listen to your textbooks and you listen to your teachers.
And the truth is, you kind of become a parrot.
Totally.
In a sense.
That's
right.
To a certain degree, that's the way it's designed, right? Teachers are supposed to know, they're supposed to teach students.
Right.
But as I sort of got into this, what I started realizing is, okay, a lot of medicine, as you know, they'll tell you, this is science, this is science. All right, so I started asking obvious questions. Where's the science? This goes right back to literally the very beginning of my training in medical training. And I will tell you, what you quickly learn is there's not a ton of evidence for what we do in medicine that is really black and white, completely concrete.
Well, that's why they call it practicing.
And that's why they call it practicing, right? So what I've recognized is, wow, I said, this is not really evidence-based medicine that we practice today. It's at best evidence-informed medicine, meaning, okay, I'm informed of the evidence, and when there's lack thereof, then I have to exercise my own judgment, my own reason, my own logic, combined with what the patient in front of me is experiencing. And that is really the art or the practice of medicine. But here's the scary thing. Over time, what I have seen is they have been sort of trying to get rid of that art, and they've tried to protocolize medicine. And as they protocolize medicine, two things have to happen. One, they kind of have to create a crisis in order to create fear, in order to create compliance of the protocols. And once you have those protocols in place, then you lose that ability, because of the next step after compliance is if you don't comply, you could be threatened, you could get punished.
Well, and here's the other thing that I realize, and I say they, I'm talking about the doctors in general as a whole, they don't try to really figure out the problem. They just give you medicine or pills to mask it. And that's kind of really where they're focus is or seems to be today. I mean, I could be wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. That again, it goes back to the sort of the teaching, right? The teaching is allopathic, is what they call it, which is basically there's a medicine to fix every symptom we have. And then what we do is we're very symptom based, which this mental health crisis is all about, right? We're not treating the underlying causes of diseases. We often treat symptoms. And we treat symptoms, one, because it's easier, right? I can treat a symptom far more than I can cure a disease.
Right.
And then two, treating symptoms create
money.
Chronic patients create money. Money creates power, and power creates control, and the cycle continues.
Yeah, it just literally keeps you in the financial pocket.
It just, the more you are essentially dependent upon the healthcare system, then the more money and power they have. And of course, there's nothing better than the mental health care system, because I can't prove any of this, right? So anything we're talking about mental health, I can't get a brain scan and show you that you are depressed or anxious. I can't get a blood test to show you depressed. So it's incredibly subjective. So it's kind of the perfect storm to create this just money churning, power churning machine, because you can never really point to definitive evidence with mental health. And we'll talk about some of that.
Right. And that's the other thing. So when we go through this, though, and we're going to look at charts, guys, as we scroll through this and work our way through the podcast, that charts show what's working and what is not working, right? I mean, like we
largely
do
what is not working.
Yeah,
right.
But we do have facts, and we have things in place that tell us what's good, what's bad, what works, what doesn't work, the pros, cons, so on and so forth. And that's what we're going to look at today, because like you said, there is no scan to show anxiousness, but there is clear evidence that what they're doing for anxiety doesn't work.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. The evidence is pretty stark, actually, but they hide it well. And it's very manipulative, right? Stats lie and they really lie, right? So it's like you can make statistics show anything you want, and hide statistics, but the more I've learned about the data, it's really presented by the people who have a lot of motive to twist the data. So a lot of data is twisted. You really got to dig and find it. But I'll tell you, it's not that hard. And that's sort of the exciting thing. I think individuals can start to take back agency over their own mental health and stop just relying on these experts.
Well, what was funny, what I find interesting is people say, yeah, I take it and it makes me feel bad. It makes me feel like this, makes me feel like that. I can't stand it. I hate taking it. And I'm like, well, then quit. Well, the doctor said, like, oh, you become your own doctor for a minute. Like, you know your body.
I mean, if you could give away the ending before the beginning of this whole podcast, what I literally say is that it's like, man, do not give up your agency. Which basically means don't give up your God-given reason, knowledge, logic. Like, go in with, let me figure this out, and let me use, if I'm going to, an expert as just a data point, just a part of how I'm going to make my decisions to handle my own healthcare, and particularly your mental health, even more so.
Right.
So.
Okay, so let's jump into this, and as I'm looking at this, we have a bunch of charts. So I'm gonna hand this to you, and you just walk us through this process.
Okay, all right. So the first thing that's really important to recognize is, if you're going to start to get control of the mental health care system, you have to control the people. And the first way you control the people, the best way you control the people, and as we know, this is completely biblical. So, I mean, all things come originally from God, and then the Satan and the world and his army just completely twists it. So if you create a crisis, you are able to then all of a sudden control people, right? Because crisis equals fear equals compliance.
That's the thing, right? The crisis equals fear. And that is the biggest tactic that we see medicine do, we see the government do. Anybody looking for money and power, they use a crisis.
Absolutely. Again, it's pretty simple because it works.
Right.
It works. Anybody see what happened with COVID? We were scared, we complied, and we see the results. So, I mean, most people, it's nice that we kind of have that recent history to point to, but you can just look back in all of time, all of time back, thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, dozens of years ago. COVID was just recent, but it works. It's really, really effective.
Right.
So the crisis starts with getting everyone to first recognize, I think there is a crisis. So you capture the institutions, right? You talked about the big ones: government, media, our education system, Hollywood, which is also kind of media, and then of course, social media flows into all of that, and then the healthcare systems. You capture all the institutions. You get everybody singing on the same sheet of music, which is there is a mental health crisis. Then you start asking people questions that you already know the answer to, like, "Hey, have you ever felt anxious?" And everybody responds yes, and they're like, everybody's anxious. Hey, do you think there's a crisis then? Yes, I think there's a crisis. Everybody thinks there's a crisis. And then to make the crisis even worse, what you have to start to say is how serious this is, how there's so few ways to get help, like just to the experts, and there's not that many of them.
Right.
So to think about this, it's sort of like classic, like FOMO. You ever hear FOMO, right? Fear of missing out, right? I must have a problem. The world is telling me that. I need an expert to solve the problem. Everybody has this problem. There's only a finite amount of experts and their availability to help me. I better go get help right away.
And
crisis.
And the experts always, their answer is come back next week and we'll talk again.
Of course, right? Yes. I mean, that's how it works. Like, again, so here's the other thing. Part of this sort of capturing institution is they capture language. Think about this. I was actually just thinking about this the other day. When's the last time you heard somebody, it was actually in youth when we were talking about this, and when you hear somebody say, man, you know what, I'm sad, I'm bummed, no, what do they say? I'm depressed. They like, when did that happen? Well, because the constant capturing of the language, depression, like where did human, just regular lay people start using what we call ICD-9 codes? That is a diagnosis, depression, like that like doctors use. But like people don't say, I'm sad. No, they go right to depressed, or they go right to, I'm anxious, instead of I'm worried or I'm a little stressed. Like you hear these medical terms thrown out. That's really purposeful. Like that you have to realize. Every commercial, every marketing, it's all about, I'm depressed. So when you capture the institutions, then you capture the language, and all of a sudden we're using these medical terms to describe, like, what are you talking about? Like I spilled my coffee on my lap and it stained my pants and now I have to go out today. I'm anxious. What do you mean? Like I'm just like a little stressed or bummed or worried that my stain on my pants. Like I have a disease. Like I'm anxious. Like, but that is what they'll change the language. And if you spill enough stuff on your pants enough, maybe you better go see a doctor. This anxiety's like killing you. No, just stop spilling stuff on your pants, dude. Right? I don't know. Maybe a silly example.
No, well, because I don't know that it's silly as much as it is true that it doesn't matter what it is. We were talking about the LGBT movement, right? And how they have made that medical. And what do? They change the language. And all of a sudden, because words matter.
Oh. Exactly.
And I think people forget that words matter. And if you can control the vocabulary will control the thoughts.
100%. And that is, so now you've kind of got this set up, right? You got this crisis set up. Like, oh my goodness, there's so much demand, which means so many people with problems, only a few experts who can solve them. Everybody better go get help. Hence the crisis. So go ahead, you can hit sort of my next slide.
Okay.
So if you look at this, guys, I mean, what you'll see here is mental health therapy is at an all-time high, right? So a lot of people only think about the drugs here, right? The prescriptions, but therapy itself is absolutely skyrocketing. So, okay. Everyone's in therapy. I mean, think about it. I mean, if you are listening to this podcast, you definitely know somebody in therapy.
Right.
And if you don't, it's just because they haven't told you. They're secretly going to therapy. But, I mean, it's insane. So, okay, so we've got this crisis, but hey, at first glance, it looks like we got it under control. If you saw that chart, like therapy's going through the roof.
Right.
People are getting help. All right, looking good, right?
Well, let's look at this chart again. I'm gonna put it up, and dude, I'm looking at the numbers. So in 2002, you had what 27.2 million people who received mental health, and then in 2022 we have 55.8 million people. So when you're looking at this chart, it has literally doubled in stats.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's absolutely
and rapidly.
incredible. Yeah.
Rapidly. Like again, I'm gonna pull this up again real quick. So we see it stayed pretty consistent from 2002, honestly, to about 2011, and then in 2012 it started going up, and then in 2019 it really started going up, and then by 2022 it just like zoomed off the charts.
Absolutely. And if we had the 24 stats, it's just hard to get the most recent stats.
Right.
It's even high. It just continues.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably, I'm going to say, well over 70 million today, easy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this thing is on a rapid, it's what they call a hockey stick, right? Kind of goes gradually up and then starts to hockey stick.
Yeah.
And
you can see 22, it really started. And I'm wondering if, remember that fear you were talking about? That fear of COVID. And then everybody got so anxious about possibly being sick or whatever. Wear a mask, separate yourself from your family, separate yourself from your children, stay home, don't go out, lockdown. And people started breaking down. And now, I don't know that anybody's really recovered.
I don't think so. I think it's clear that,
some have woken up, but I don't know that a whole lot have recovered.
No, I mean, again, as you can see, everybody's in therapy. So, I mean, clearly not.
That's what I was saying in the beginning. Like, stats don't lie.
Stats don't lie. So this is the interesting part, though. At first, if you're kind of just thinking this logically, you're like, okay, like, so you just said there's a crisis, Keith, and but good. You told me good news. Everybody's in therapy. Let's keep going.
All right.
Let's take a look. Like, look at this. I guess you could start to think, first of all, this is more good news, right? And some of these charts got cut off, even in my slides. So, but the important thing to realize, honestly, is the trends here, not even the absolute
numbers. What are we
numbers,
looking at here
right?
on this one?
So, I mean, we're basically just looking at prescriptions for mental health medications.
Okay.
Right. So it's less the raw numbers that I want to just show you the dramatic rise.
The rise.
I mean, at the end of the day, like right now, depending on what stats you look at, because it's very hard actually to get the most accurate stats. Right. 1 in 4 people maybe on a mental health medication as much as, and it's like 70% of those who go to therapy get a mental health medication. Right. So you start to look at this and it's like you can see where this is going. Therapy's going up. Yep. If you go to therapy, you eventually go to another doctor that they send you to, usually called a medical doctor, who can write the prescription.
Well,
the prescription's then written, and
they're putting medicine on top of medicine on top of medicine. They're using medicine to counteract medicine. Now and then sometimes the prescriptions they give people for anxiety or depression will be 2-3 pills, man. And they just...
Well, you know why that is? So here's why, right? So most people understand at the most basic level when I talk about this in sort of substance abuse addiction, right? So I want to get a buzz. I don't drink barely anything, so I could probably drink 2-3 beers or whatever, and I might get a little buzz. But over time, 2-3 beers aren't going to give me a buzz anymore. Then I got to have 4 or 5. Then I got to have 6, 7. Then I got to have a case before I get a buzz. Same thing with anything. If you're addicted to any drug, right? Opioids, same thing, right? Opioids, you got to get a higher and higher dose to get the same effect. The body's incredibly adaptive, so that's why that happens. So the reason why you see people on more and more meds, they're on 1, then they're on 2, then they're on 3, then they're on 4, is 2 reasons. One,
eventually one quits working.
Right. Well, we'll get to beginning. One, they never worked. So there's number one. But even if they're getting some effect, may not be the desired effect, like working for your problem. That whatever effect it's getting is still your body's adapting to it, and you need more and more and more and more. So you get this. I mean, this is like the worst sort of spider web coming together of it's not really working anyway, so of course we need more. And then whatever effect you are getting is absolutely, like most medications, especially ones that sort of alter body chemistry and hormones, you need more and more and more of them to get the same effect feeling. So they're going up in both frequency, the number of people getting prescriptions, and they're going up in the number of prescriptions and the doses they get. So this is sort of, if you're a finance guy, it's like compounding interest, except in a really bad way, negatively compounding, right? Yeah. So, but again, if you're looking at these charts, you're still thinking, all right, Keith, what's the problem? Like, okay, you said there's a crisis. Everybody is anxious. Everybody's depressed. That's what the institutions are telling me. And we got to solve it. So we're getting more therapy and more medications. This should be working. Keep it rolling. Keep it rolling.
Man. Okay, here we go.
So, I mean, this slide again is just showing basically the reason why this is important is the mental health diagnoses that are coming here are rising in all countries, but the U.S. wins them all. The U.S. is the absolute worst, and that's because our medical industry, as well as all the other industry, is the most captured. Right. So we are the most captured.
Here's the other thing too that we see. Not only are we rising in, as you see in this chart, are we rising in anxiety and the mental health issues, but we're also the country that has the worst food in the world. And I mean, because other countries won't touch our food. They don't want it. They're not interested in it. Don't send it this way. I was reading an article where Fruit Loops. So because other countries won't take our food unless it's certain ways. And so Fruit Loops, they changed the recipe so that it was a healthy Fruit Loops, and then they send it overseas, right? And
sounds like an oxymoron. Right. Healthy Fruit Loops. But okay, I'll trust you.
Right. Well, then...
Certainly healthier. I'll buy that.
Healthier. Yeah. I don't know that anything is really healthy.
I want those healthy Fruit Loops.
But because they won't allow red dye 40 and yellow and all these other dyes.
Yeah.
So Fruit Loops takes them out. Mm-hmm. But in American food, they leave them all in, which just jacks up these kids, man, because that red dye 40, and there was another red dye in there, 5, I think is what it is, or yellow number 5, and it literally sends these kids into another world. Off the chart. Now we got ADHD or ADD, and so the foods have created more mental health issues.
So you said a bunch of things there that actually we shouldn't brush over. So one, who would it possibly? Actually, before I say that, the first thing that's actually funny is how are you? You fitting the narrative here. You're talking about cures. We don't want to talk about cures. That doesn't, right? I mean, you're getting to the root cause of the problem. Right. As you see, as we learn about this, they're not interested in getting at root causes of the problem. Diet is certainly one of them. As we'll talk about, there's a lot of other root causes.
Right.
But they're not interested in that. They're interested in covering up the symptoms because that's how the machine works.
Well, and here's what's crazy. In all of this, like I was saying, the red dye, the yellow dye, all this chemicals that's going in the food. It is the pharmacy companies that are paying the food companies to put this stuff in.
You can always follow the money, right? Follow the money. Like who would possibly benefit? I mean, think about. I mean, this is like
think about that.
This is a pretty bold statement to make. So forget. Let's just use health in general. Who would possibly benefit if all of us got dramatically healthier?
Yeah. I mean, we would benefit.
That's it.
The people,
just
but
the
not,
patients.
There's no money.
There's absolutely no money in getting healthier.
Right.
So no, the food companies, they're getting rich off giving us garbage, and the pharmaceutical companies are getting wealthier and wealthier off, to a large degree, giving us garbage.
Right.
So who wins financially if we're all healthier? And those are some of the questions people go, that's not true, Keith. The healthcare system cares about me. Well, actually the healthcare system absolutely does not care
Does
about
not
you
give
at all.
Nothing.
Maybe you can find an individual person who cares about you. Again, this is not a bashing on my whole industry. There are good doctors, good nurses, good PAs, good therapists, but most of them, if you talk about the majority of them, are what we call useful idiots. And that sounds so insulting, but some of them I really don't blame. You were taught by your teachers, which you should listen to, and you are now protocolized to do this. And unless you really dig into like evidence-based medicine like I have, and you have to have both. So you have to, one, learn the knowledge that what you're being told might not always be true. And then two, even if you know it, you got to stand up, which could mean lose your job. And so it's really hard, but it's coming from the top down. So anyway, just the point on this is, man, I got to tell you, the U.S. is the absolute worst, and the reason is because of the captured institutions.
Yeah,
and they're absolutely captured, and largely from two reasons: money and power.
Right.
And that's just the way it is. So, the next slide that we're talking about here is, all right, this is where it all sort of can sort of start to come together, right? I mean, just quicking look at this is self-reported here. Look at the age groups. Everybody is basically reporting that their mental health is getting worse.
Right.
So over the years and years and years, what's happening is everyone's reporting worse and worse mental health. So this is the first kind of maybe head scratcher, because the first slides I told you is, okay, here's what's happening. There's a crisis, but good news, we're solving it. Therapy's going up. Medications for mental health are going up. So shouldn't our mental health be getting better?
It should be. Theoretically.
So, wait a second. Like, this is the first one where like people need to wake up. Like, and go, wait a second.
Right.
I don't understand. Well, then people start to go, well, yeah, you show me an example. Like, what do you mean? Well, how should it be getting better? Okay. Oh, we should actually report this too. So some people say on that last slide, well, subjectivity, Keith. People report poor mental health, but what does that really mean? First of all, that's like completely flipping the logic on them, because that's what I say. Like, how are you diagnosing? Remember that diagnosis slide is going through the roof. How are you diagnosing so many people?
Right.
So let's just get down to like, nobody can argue like suicide rates, right? So suicide rates, of course, will be going down, right? Because we have more therapy, more people are getting help. They're getting therapy and they're getting meds. Suicide rates continue to climb.
Right.
So now we're really at the head scratcher. So people are feeling worse and people are committing suicide more, while our treatments are going through the roof.
Right. So here we are looking at this chart, and if you look in 2001, dude, it was relatively low. And all the way to 2006, not a whole lot of change. 2007, and from that point on, man, it just started going up and up and up. And what we find out is the fact that the medicine that they're giving them, and I might be jumping ahead of your slides because obviously we've not went over this, but the medicine they're giving them for anxiety or depression is actually a suicidal medicine.
We are definitely going to get to that. Flip to the next slide. Because I do just want to hit on this one thing before we talk, because there's so much to talk about the negative, because nobody talks about that. Right. Everyone always talks about the positive. Right. So, but first, look how the chart should look. So this is just an example of when we introduced antibiotics. Right? So we had a problem, we had a crisis. What happened? People were getting serious infections and dying. All right? Now we introduce the cure, antibiotics. Look what happened. Look what happened when we introduced antibiotics. Infectious disease and death dropped. Remember the charts I showed you? They're all from down to the left and up to the right. They're all hockey sticking higher as we've introduced treatment.
Right.
What should happen is you introduce a treatment to a crisis.
Right.
And just like we showed you, it should drop like a rock.
Right.
And we have a perfect example for that in antibiotics. And we got another example. I could literally pick dozens and dozens of actually real diseases. Right. But this is like breast cancer. As soon as we started getting breast cancer screening and breast cancer treatment, breast cancer death rates dropped, just as you'd expect.
Right.
So what the heck is going on? How could it be that we have all of these people getting the cure, air quote, for mental health problems, yet mental health problems are skyrocketing?
Right.
Nobody's asking these questions. I am thoroughly convinced that's because the institutions are captured. But we need to start asking questions, right? The people it affects.
Okay, and again, I'm not This is by no means coming across as conspiracy theorist because, well, just quite frankly, I'm out of conspiracies because it's just call me a truth teller now, right? But when you say institutions are bought, well, let's look at what happened when they started coming out with cures for COVID. Anybody that was telling you a cure for COVID lost their business or was made to look crazy or was shut down.
Right.
I mean, my point in saying all that is you're right. Institutions are bought, meaning that, and we see it over and over and over and over again. If you want to keep your business, you hush, and you just do what we tell you.
You nailed it. I mean, it's that cycle of capturing the institutions, really sort of celebrating the falsities of we've got a cure, yay, everybody come here. And then if you don't buy in, first you get threatened and then you can get downright punished. And that's sort of what's happened in mental health. They've protocolized so much of this that, one, we should, and we will, talk about how these diagnoses are just plain false. People don't have what they're saying they have. There's the first problem. But then once they have what they say they have, they are giving a medication that you just should, or therapy. So I'll just call it treatment in general. They're giving therapy and or medication, and it's not working. The stats are clear. Like I showed you how the charts should look, the exact opposite if they were working. They're not working. So there's only one really answer to that, which is this is purposeful. I mean, they are doing this on purpose. When I say they, I say, who are they? It is those who lead these institutions, in particularly healthcare. It's the big pharma system has the most money, but then honestly, it is some of the leadership even at the largest sort of government medical institutions, because they have a motive, and the motive is to create that compliance.
So I don't remember what year it was, but it was a long time ago. Rockefellers, they started making these pills that they prescribe out of petroleum, right? So the coatings were petroleum, so on and so forth. Well, I don't know if people realize, but you don't pull up to the gas pump and drink gas. You don't take a sip of your oil before you pour it into the motor. You don't go out and lick asphalt. Well, I hope you don't.
Nah.
My point is petroleum products are not good for us. And yet, that's what they make these pills out of, petroleum products.
Yeah, most of this.
Which are going to help keep people sick.
Yeah, I mean, it's some of it is just simply the fact that if your goal is to profit, what you need to do is, right, and this is not rocket science. I mean, you don't have to be a finance major or an economics major to understand this, but you need top-line revenue growth, i.e. sick people who get diagnosed with a disease, and then I need to give them treatment. But then at the other end of it, well, you need bottom line profitability. And in order to get profitability, oftentimes what you will see is whatever is just the cheapest way to produce this. So some of this is, it's not always like I'm purposefully hurting you. I just have a goal, which is to profit. And if it happens to hurt you because I use products that are just easier to get or cheaper to get or easier to make, so be it. So they may not even be trying to hurt you. They just don't care that they are.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? But either way, the result for us humans is the same thing.
Yeah. I would say the end result's the same.
Same thing.
Right. And I don't know, dude, I don't know that there are some obviously doctors that care. I'm not diminishing that, but I think that field is diminishing.
So here's what it is. This is where I'm actually really empathetic to it. I mean, this is my field, right? So what happens is if you talk to them one-on-one, actually it's the opposite. Most do care. But here's the thing. Do they care about you, the patient, more than they care about themselves? Right. And the answer to that, which I'm empathetic to, although I wish more people had the biblical worldview like we do, and I actually should care about others more than myself. That's almost like the primary theology of Christianity, right? I mean, it's in Matthew. God said, the whole law hangs on love the Lord God, and he says, love others as yourself.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Love your neighbor as yourself. So, if that's what it all hangs on, then you really shouldn't. But I can certainly understand. I care about you, but not more than I care about myself.
Right.
And if I potentially will lose my revenue, maybe even lose my job, maybe even lose my license, you start to justify it into yourself going, well, I do care about my patient, Pastor John, but I can't sacrifice myself over him. So a lot of it's that. And that I'm empathetic to. It's still wrong, and it's bad, and it's hurtful. Back to the same end result, bad for us. But that's where we went back to the beginning. We need to take back agency of ourselves and start to ask questions. So when you go see the experts, first of all, go less. I mean, that's just bottom line. See them less. And then secondly, when you get there,
I don't think people
don't turn your brain off. They don't know as much as you think they know. They were just, like you said, they're parrots. If you even go to the doctor, how often now will they be like if you ask them why, I rarely ever go because I can take care of myself and my own family. I mean, I'm in a unique situation as a medical professional, but
there's many of us who call you.
Yeah, right. But even so, like I always ask them why, and so I'm getting this through reporting because I'm not in front of them. But their why will often be something. The CDC says so, or the American Academy of Pediatrics says so, or they're not really thinking anymore because they have, this is what I've been taught.
Right.
This is what, so, that's where you got to be the thinker. Like, so ask the whys. And if they give you that kind of cookie cutter answer, all right, that's not good enough for you. You need to question more. You need to be skeptical more. And over time, what you will find is there are some good eggs out there who will, essentially you break them down, right? I mean, you tell a story of a guy who you went and saw, who I sent you to, the ortho guy. He just kind of gave it to you straight. So they're out there, but...
Yeah, and here's the thing, though. Like, I loved... Okay, his bedside manner? Nah. But probably one of my favorite doctors I've ever visited, right? Because, of course, my bedside manner...
You were like, I can relate to this guy.
I can relate to this guy. But I was in a motorcycle accident several years ago, messed my hand up, and I went to one doctor, and they were telling me what I could do to fix it, the surgeries, and there were like several different surgeries, whatever, and they're like, but hold off. And then I go see this guy that you tell me, and he was like, look, this is what I do for a living. This is my specialty. Hands are my specialty.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to tell you, there is nothing that's going to help you, and you're just going to have to suck it up and live with it because, you're done, right? I mean, but I was like, and most people would have been offended with the fact that he looked at me and went, dude, suck it up. There's nothing that's ever going to help you. You're going to live in pain. It's going to be this. Work through it. Take an aspirin. But
here's the other. Tell him what he told you, because I thought this was almost the most. He's like, almost he kind of gave you like what I could have done, which is I could have sent you through a whole bunch of things. You wouldn't have known any better. Right. If you go to another doctor, they may even tell you to do these things, but they're probably not going to work. They may even put you under the knife because, hey, you want help? I'll try.
Well, he didn't even say probably. He was like, if you find a doctor, he said, if you find a doctor that says he can fix this, he's lying to you, and he's only taking his money. If there was a way to fix this, I would fix it for you because I want your money. Right.
But see that kind of, so it's out there in little bits and pieces. But my point is, if you don't,
I loved that. I was like, dude, I love you, man.
Yes. I mean, but that, because, man, but if you ask enough questions, you can get to people who will really help you in that way. That's part of taking the agency back. So number one, stop going so often.
Well, the first doctor I went to, which was a super nice guy, but the first time I went to see him, and I was telling him about my hand, and he's like, well, you got this problem. I go, well, I think it's deeper than that because, and he goes, are you the doctor or am I?
Yeah, right.
Why did you come and see me? And I was like, whoa, dude, take a breath, man. I mean, so they will push themselves as well.
Absolutely.
But like you said, you got to take control. You got to take it back.
control for yourself. Keep rolling with this, so because we're going to get to some of the stuff that I know they're going to love. All right, so just another slide to show. I just showed you like using, breast cancer death rates and infectious disease rates, how they looked, right? They dropped like a rock.
Dropped.
And here's like medications, therapy going up, mental health crisis going up right along with it. Like, this is not how it should be if you actually had a cure. So we don't want to beat a dead horse, but keep going to the next one now. So you want to talk about the meds now?
Yeah, so
I'm ready if you're ready.
No, dude, jump in it, man. Because here's the thing. Because people are taking these medications for a multitude of reasons, right? But I don't know. Okay, forgive me, guys. Those of you listening, if I say this offensively, I don't know. All right, when you come to the realization that it's not working, when do you stop? Like after how many weeks, months, years? So, for example, I had issues with high blood pressure. I ended up going to the hospital. I was delirious. Like my whole system was just jacked up. So they put me on a blocker. Well, the problem with the blocker is that when I was taking the blocker, I became a zombie. But it shut off I would eat, and 15 minutes later, my body was saying I was hungry. So I put on 25 pounds. Well, on a man, it all goes in the gut because, well, number one, I'm not working out. I'm not doing anything because I have no energy. I was just existing. So I go to the doctor that gave me this medicine, which, granted, took away my migraine, because, I had migraines too.
Yeah.
Took away my migraines and lowered my blood pressure. But I was barely functioning. So I went back to him and I said, listen, I can't live like this because I'm not living anymore. And it's horrible. And I said, you need to take me off of this. He goes, no, you need to stay on this for a while longer. I said, you don't understand. This is killing me. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, like I'm dying in every way. And I said, you need to take me off. And he said, I'm not going to take you off. So I looked at him and I said, this is the last day I'm taking it. Right. I'm done. And he's like, if you stop, you will have a heart attack and die. You cannot just stop. You have to be, now I got to be weaned off of this stuff, right? Yep. So I told him, I'm going to take my chances because I'm dying anyway, right? Because, well, you've known me long enough.
Yeah. I would have recommended weaning as well, I'm just being honest, because that would have been safer.
Right. So he looks at my wife and he's like, he's just going to stop taking it. She goes, yeah, you need to do something here to help him. And he goes, no, I'm leaving him on it. I go, no, you don't understand. I'm taking myself off of it because if I got to live this way, I'd rather die.
Right. The cure, air quote, is worse than the disease, right?
It really was.
Yeah, right.
So I stopped taking the medicine, and my heart did race a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I don't recommend doing what I do. And then I got off of it. But then that's when I started taking over, right? Because I realized, listen, and I truly believe the doctor did care about me and he liked me, but
yeah, he told you the right thing, which is to wean off it after you told him you were not going to take it anymore.
Yeah, I'm like, But the truth is, he should have said, hey, let's work together. Right. Instead, he's like, nope, you're going to do what I say. Well, dude, I'm going to die because I'm dying anyway. Anyway, long story short, I get off the medicine. I take over my life. And this has been 15 years ago, right? So I'm going to say 15, 16 years ago now. And so I just started doing a ton of research. Dude, I haven't been on. So I'll be 57 in a couple of months. I'm on 0 meds.
Yeah,
0.
That's awesome.
Right?
Yeah, I think people again sticking on this particular topic, but it really flows to everything.
Right.
Which is like,
well, that was this is my point.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Like we all want the easy button, right? Which would be, I just pop a pill and I'm better. And now I'm sure you have to have put in a ton of work over 15 years to try to manage your migraines, to try to manage your blood pressure, to stay healthy, stay in shape. Like, that's a ton of work. You know how much easier it would have been to just take that pill? But the problem is, and again, this isn't universal. So, sticking to the topic of mental health, this actually is universal in mental health, though. Like, that's why this is such an important topic. So,
well, here's the other thing too. The truth is, dude, the medicine that they gave me mentally shut me off.
Sure.
All I could do was sleep.
Yeah.
And eat. It was horrible. It was horrible.
Sounds like a cat.
I know, right?
You became a cat.
Or an old
what did he
fat
give
dog.
So if you bring up this next slide, this one is really, so this is where it starts to really become so obvious. Next slide. Or that slide right there.
Right, okay.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
If you bring up this slide here. So what this is showing, and this is old because I think they stopped reporting this data because they don't want people to know, but this is even worse today. One class of medications is the one that they are constantly prescribing, right? I mean, in this case, they call them antidepressants, but they really are this SSRIs, right? So think about it. All the mental health diseases in the world, OCD, ADHD, depression, anxiety, bipolar. I mean, I could just start listing a million of them. The only med that is increasing dramatically, and they're prescribing everyone, is this one class of medications called the SSRIs, which is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, or SNRIs, which is selective serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor. Bottom line is, don't worry about any of that. They just sort of increase the serotonin and norepinephrine in your whole body, including your brain. And it just, think about it this way. If you had like high blood pressure and low blood pressure, those are just completely opposite diseases.
Yeah, totally opposite.
Totally opposite.
Yeah.
I could not give you the same med to cure both, right? That would be insane. But here we have anxiety, I'm up here, and I have depression, I'm down here, and I give you the same meds, and it's supposed to solve it. Every disease that they say, disease air quote, because these are not real diseases, we need to talk about here kind of in conclusion, is treated by the same class of medication. That makes no sense.
Right.
So, but it's important to know that is a fact. So one class of medications is being prescribed through the roof if you look at all those stats of medications go up. So now if you can keep going to the next slides, right? Well, that's because essentially all of these things are just, we're treating symptoms. And essentially, think about it. You have anxiety, you have depression, you have ADHD, OCD. They're all basically the same symptoms, right? They really are. Have you known an anxious person who's not depressed?
I know.
Of course they're depressed. You're anxious. Like, I'd be depressed too. Like, do you know a depressed person who's not anxious? No, of course you're anxious when you're depressed. And again, all of these sort of brain diseases all come down to the same thing, a class of symptoms that all completely overlap.
Right.
So first of all, that starts to debunk all these things called diagnoses instead of, no, these are actually feelings. So they are real feelings, which we'll get into, but they are not real diseases.
Right. But in order to mask feelings, you have to call it a disease. Remember, it's that vocabulary thing again, right? And it allows the person to become the victim.
Oh, that is so true. So if you can,
because if you got a disease, you can't control it now.
So you nailed it, right? So let's going back to like my silly example of spilling, coffee on my pants and stained. There's no ICD-9 code for that. They can't bill for that. Oh, Keith came in today and had spilling his pants on his disease. There's no code. They can't, but they can bill for anxiety. Yeah. So
because they've classified anxiety as a disease.
Correct. Right. So you see how this is just even not necessarily nefarious by the doctor in front of him. It's just like, well, of course he came in. I need to get paid. He has anxiety now. When I give you a worse example. It's like, and maybe we should take a step back here and actually realize these are not diseases. We need to actually take that stance. These are feelings. Right. And by the way, they're real feelings. So some people get mad at that. They're like, Keith, you're not, you're just blowing this off. No. These are real feelings. I mean, I'll give you an example of like, if my parents tragically die in an accident today, I am going to be very sad. I'm going to be upset. You want to use even their word. I'm going to be very depressed. These are real feelings. If I walk out of here
But what they do is they're like, oh, you need medicine for that.
well,
Rather than work through it, let's medicate you.
of course, right? I mean, and it gets worse. Like, again, I even give the example. It's like, imagine I walk out of here and a bear starts chasing me. I'm really anxious.
A little bit.
Yeah, I should be, right? But here's the thing. These feelings are God-given.
Right.
So God gave us the feeling of sadness, of worry, of anxiety, of stress. Why? Well, because in order to actually perform, right? Imagine like I had a big test today, right? If I wasn't a little bit anxious about taking that test, would I study as hard?
Right,
Would I get up as early and be as focused? Would I sit down? Right? I mean, imagine like, again, the bear is chasing me. If I wasn't anxious, I'd just be like, no big deal. And I get eaten by the bear, right? Like, I mean, these
are things God
these are
has given
real
us.
feelings that have absolute real purpose. And what we're going to talk about is these feelings are being numbed. They're actually just numbing all of your feelings.
Right.
And if you numb all of your God-given feelings, you are just destroying who you really are.
Well,
and that's why people are getting worse.
Yeah, and they lose themselves, which
Totally
then
lose
requires more
themselves.
medicine. So what I want to do in part 2 is I want to discuss the feelings. I want us to look at that, right? Because we look at a medical side and how we've gotten there. Now the feelings part of it, which people can control if they're willing. Well, we're going to talk about that in part 2. So, hey guys, listen, I hope that you are enjoying this. I hope that you have learned and you are learning through this as Keith and I continue to walk through it. We're going to look at the feeling side of it, and then of course how they medicate that, what all that looks like, the damage that it does, how you can overcome it, and then we're going to look at the spiritual side. What does the Bible say? Does God even talk about anxiety? And He does. And how does He tell us to handle it? What can we do? Is it normal? And so we're going to look at all of that in the next episode, part 2 of this whole medical.
We're going to give you the cure in part 2. So you got to come back for part 2. The actual cure we'll talk about. And the good news is there is a cure.
Yes. And so, Keith, thank you for joining me on According to John.
Yes.
And we're going to check it out again for next week, part 2. Make sure that you jump in for that. So, guys, until the next time, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week, and that you start investigating this medicine and share this podcast with someone you know. Until next time, God bless.